All right, I guess we'll start. Welcome everyone to our presentation, FNNBOA on architectural drawings. My name is John Kodrowski and project manager for FNNBOA since our inception. And the reason why we are holding these webinars, one of our plans we've always had as an association is to have a set of drawings that we could make available for free to First Nation communities that would address all of the issues in building codes and actually going beyond the code. And so we had an opportunity as part of our Indigenous Building Knowledge Exchange. And as a result, we had a set of drawings produced for us, a 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, and 2 bedroom complex. And so today we want to just go over some of these drawings because when we produced it, the plans, we had immediate concerns by a lot of the First Nation community saying, well, these are great, but you need to explain to us and go over some of the issues relating to the architectural drawings. So that's where Claude, who I will turn over to now, is taking on this task. Go ahead, Claude.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Again, my background is architecture and actually building construction and design. So I'm really pleased to be able to present this on behalf of FNNBOA, First Nation Building Officers Association. And really, I want to give you kind of a general overview of really a good professionally designed working drawings for this particular housing design. As John mentioned, there's a number of different, we'll call it number of different bedroom housing units that are available, the 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom, and certainly a duplex units. But our primary focus today, I thought, we're going to sit at the 3-bedroom home. And again, we need to give a lot of credit out to the architect and we'll call it the architectural design team. So again, to Jason Serkan, Solo Architecture. And you can see there's a list of consultants sort of in the middle of the page there. The structural engineer, David Wing, and there was energy modeling also done on this particular house. As John mentioned, he was talking about building code and going a little bit beyond building code. And as likely some, if not many of you know, climate change seems to be a buzzword when we talk about building code, and certainly the extremes we're going through in weather kind of gives us a little bit of evidence of, is this normal or are we going through really climatic change? So again, when we looked at not just the design of a good building structure and a good set of drawings, also the energy modeler a component really needs to be considered. So what is suitable for a particular region? And the building code does address that because there are a number of different climate zones within Canada and across the country. But when we take a look at the requirements for, we just simply can't take a house from southern Ontario, where I live, and plant it in, let's say, northern Manitoba, or in fact, the Yukon. So again, although that may work, is it the best value and certainly build for that particular region? So again, these drawings sort of address many of these issues. So a lot of nice presentations. Okay, over to the left-hand side, we see some interior renderings, and over to the right-hand side, kind of we'll call it the front porch area, and sort of a area that we could take a look at the back, or we'll say the rear portion of the house. As I mentioned, a lot of this is going to be focusing on just really a drawing review, and I kind of put a brief outline together. So we can see an overview of the architectural plans, certainly the role of the architect, and not just the architect, certainly the engineer, and certainly the modeling component. But I think one of the important things, if anybody's going to be using the drawings, is we really have to read and understand what is contained on these particular drawings. So what do we really see? What should we see? And hopefully there's no misunderstanding what is portrayed. As John and I were talking about earlier, having been involved with a number of different, we'll say, reviews of different drawings, we see them from not so great, a little bit better, to, in this case, very, very high performance design construction drawings. And we want to focus on some of these key drawings. So if we really start with the very first sheet of the drawings, typically we're going to find a sheet list. So over to the right-hand side, we can see there is a sheet list indicating the sheet number. That's the architectural drawing numbers, that A series, A00 or A0.0, which is really the cover sheet, down to, let's say, roughly A-25.0 notes, or for example, E for electrical or L for landscaping, basically a site plan. So again, over to the left of that is kind of a capture of the structural engineering drawings. Again, those are designated typically with the letter designation S, so the S series drawings. So for example, S1.0, again, general notes. So again, we could take a look at this in that perspective. The main focus, I'm going to be flipping back between architectural and structural primarily. So again, just kind of an overview of where we're going to travel with this. As I mentioned, what we see and other information needed to gain appreciation of the value of professionally designed drawings, to me, is very, very important. I mentioned the fact that, you know, often construction drawings come in various shapes, sizes, and completeness. More complete, probably from an estimator's point of view, the more accurate an estimate will be. A weaker set of drawings, there's going to be that big questionable area about extras or some claims for more money because something was not explained well enough on a set of drawings. So we can see here, here's a set of roughly 20 plus drawings. I've seen as few drawings as 2 or 3 drawings. So again, it's not what's on those 2 or 3, it's the completeness of what's on those 2 or 3, and also the amount of detail and completeness that's put into any drawing project. So I'll move on to the next slide here. I want to talk a little bit, I mentioned about the importance of an architect on your team. Certainly we know that it can be expensive to have an architect on your basically build or design team. But really, if we think about it, you're getting a lot of good value for certainly inexpensive, but certainly something that's necessary if you want to have really truly successful builds. So the successful build project begins with the right people trained to help you realize your objectives, right from the design or original conception, right through the successful construction project completion. Again, there are many advantages because the architect can act as an independent that has not only designed, but is very, very familiar with what should be built, how it should be built, and the amount of detail that should be going into it. It kind of acts as, we'll call it a mediator or arbitrator between, we'll say let's say the housing manager, if you want to put it that way, and the actual builder. So kind of that middle of the road person who can say, well, this is really what the drawings intended, and that should be there. That's the way it should be built. Certainly, architects are paid for their education, training, and certainly once they're out in the field practicing their professional experience. So these are some of the tools that enable an architect to really take a design solution on any project that will meet the functional needs of what was basically part of the scope of work, the work requirement for a particular project. As I mentioned, the architect serves as an advisor, coordinator, and technical manager, and can design and administer a construction contract. You may, or one may, just have them simply do the design, and perhaps another independent administrator of the construction contract could be commissioned. So again, the importance of the architect and certainly an engineer are kind of go hand in hand. A lot of architects are not necessarily structural designers. It's two different fields of experience. And it's not to say that the architect can't design some structural components, but if it gets a little complicated, that's when the engineer is required, such as what happens when we have, let's say, unusual soil conditions. We don't want buildings to settle, so certainly an engineer becomes important. Let's try to go to the next slide here. Why is it not going? Oh, there we go. Okay. So on our next slide here, architectural drawing, in this case, A1. So if we take a look in the lower right corner down where my pointer is, A1.0 is the first in the series of architectural drawings for this 3-bedroom home. It has a lot of information. It's a very, very busy sheet. And usually the information sheet, I taught architecture in the School of Engineering locally here for over 25 years. And this was pretty much the way I would require my students, especially my senior students, to really get a good set of drawings together is to what would architects do if you're working in an architect's office. So this is pretty much sort of the standard fare, we could call it, or standard way of presenting the general information without jumping directly into a drawing per se. So a lot of information, it's a busy sheet. But if we take a look at it, this information sheet that provides information such as various construction assemblies. So if we go over to the left-hand side, it talks about construction assemblies. It talks about the partitions, the exterior walls, the various different variations of the walls. And if we go over here, the floor and then the roof and then the foundation systems. And again, you'll see this was one of my captures of that architectural drawing list. There's also a list of abbreviations because quite often, in order to not duplicate a lot of information, it's sort of, you know, like, I guess in our electronic communication world, all these little quick abbreviations or acronyms. So a list of abbreviations to kind of identify what does ADJ, adjustable, or CL. Well, CLs, those are my initials, but certainly it says on the drawing, it means center line and so on. So there's a lot of general information. And then it also talks about over to the further right, some of the symbols. So sort of the symbology or the symbols, the language of architecture, and not just architecture, also engineering. What do these symbols mean? So for example, this is a view name or a section cut detail, or this represents a door with a door swing. Here's the door, okay, the vertical, kind of a threshold at this door, so it must be an exterior door in the arc of the swing in that opening. So again, there's a lot of information that we need to get familiar with if you're not familiar with and comfortable with basically getting into the detail of architectural drawings. Again, more general notes. So for example, drawings are not to scale. So again, it's sort of a precaution indicating that if something's not to scale, don't necessarily accept that you can just simply use an architectural or engineering scale to say, oh yeah, it's 20 feet and 3 inches without actually checking to see if there's a dimension. So it's just sort of a general warning. But moving on, if I go to the next sheet, I'm going to talk a little bit about this 3D illustration. And this 3D illustration is really, this is part of the structural package. So the engineer in this case presents a nice 3D illustration of the structural system that has been designed for this particular house. We can see that it's called the cover sheet. So this is sort of the very first sheet within the structural engineering set of drawings. Again, another thing we typically look for, oh, these are really good drawings because guess what? They're stamped by an engineer. So these are meant for construction. So again, these are pre-approved, engineered drawings that are very highly reliable. Again, their company information is up here and our drawing number down here. But this 3D illustration doesn't give us a lot of information as far as detail other than here's kind of a 3D pictorial view of the house. If we take a look at it, we can see it's on a sort of a screw pile system. So here's our foundation system. We can see there's a number of floor joists. So for example, some of them are noticeable here, particularly when we take a look at, we'll call it this covered porch area, or part of the framing system for the roof. and so on. So it's nicely illustrated. It gives us a really good view of this particular 3-bedroom house from the structural engineer's point of view. Now there are parts here, for example, I see this sort of tan colored, that's a fascia, and we have columns and we have beams and floor joists. And there's parts you might say, well, they're missing. Well, no, again, it's just for illustration purposes. So again, it's not to say this isn't complete. It's just to illustrate and indicate some of the other parts, such as these basically outlooks coming out over the end wall of this particular gable area. So again, when we take a look at this, other details and alternatives are provided actually in this drawing series. It doesn't have to be necessarily this type of foundation system. But for the most part, when we take a look at the framing system from the floor up, it's pretty much standardized, which is a good thing. Well, let's take a look at S2. So when we take a look at S2, and again, I'm going to skip over some of the drawings. This is a portrayal, okay, a layout of the screw pile layout. So for example, we see a little, again, 3D illustration on the bottom, 3D view of the screw piles, again, for reference only. But when we take a look at it, it shows the center lines in actual layout and location of all these particular screw piles. And it gives us lots of information. So for example, each one of these in this rectangular box represents a tag. So this is a structural engineering tag, which is going to provide us with notes on the specific design for that particular, we'll say, foundation. Okay. So this is what we would call a pier foundation system. And if we take a look down here, it gives us more information about the screw pile loading. So for example, the pile number, the factored ultimate last state loads, okay, or actually it's probably limit state loads rather, and the unfactored service loads. So again, the information is shown in those 3 boxes for each particular, in this case, screw pile. So again, it's totally engineered out. So again, there's a lot of good information here. And certainly this is one of the very first things other than, you know, a layout as far as some of the foundation work. So again, this provides us with some really good information, certainly in a little bit of 3D form, which is kind of helpful, but also in plan view. So this is the screw pile layout drawing. If we take a look at some of the other systems, I will be talking about them briefly. I'm going to focus next on, let's call it the floor plans. So what I like to do, and technically what I would do is give my students kind of a list. What do I expect when I look at a floor plan? And actually there's a number of different references out there. The Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, and most provincial, we'll call it architectural associations, provide a list of things that should be on a floor plan. In fact, if we take a look at some of the more refined, we'll call it references, this is what a floor plan should include. So for example, so drawing of the structure is seen as if it's cut a few feet above the floor line. I used to tell my students, imagine like in a house, roughly from the floor to the ceiling is roughly 8 feet high. Let's say that we're going to cut it off roughly at the 4-foot mark. What would you see if you were looking at a plan view? So one floor plan is required for every floor of the house. So obviously if there's a basement, there's a floor plan. If there is a crawl space, there should be some kind of a layout to it. And also if we have multiple levels, then certainly there's going to be multiple floor plans, not just a floor plan. So each plan shows a layout of the level in question at that particular viewpoint, as well as providing the structural framing information for the floor or the roof above. So for example, if I'm going to show a floor plan and it should show me some structural information because it's just simply not a plan, it's simply what is holding up that particular part of the floor. For example, the floor joists, the beams, columns, or anything like that. I'm not going to go through the whole list here, but you can see floor plan should include all of the following. So for example, the scale, dimensions. Dimensions are important because in the layout in the field, the builders need to know what size are things, or how big is something, or where is it located. Size and type and location of the exterior and interior walls. Well, is it a wood frame system? Is it an ICF system, insulated concrete form system? Is it some other system? What about, where are the interior walls and partitions? Where are they located relative to, let's say, the outside wall? And certainly we need information such as the width, location, and lintel sizes of all openings. So some of the drawings I've looked at more recently, I was looking at a set of drawings for a multiple unit type row housing, and I couldn't find lintel sizes anywhere. Well, hopefully somebody refers to the building code, and hopefully the builder knows what size lintel is going to go over a particular opening. So again, with lack of information or a lack of information, you may end up with an extra, as I mentioned before, or somebody putting in the wrong size support over top of that particular opening. References to detailed drawings. Certainly, we're going to cross-reference other things that we see from the point of view of the floor plan. And certainly things such as material specifications are important. So for example, is the outside wall, is it brick? Is it vinyl siding, wood siding? What is the cladding, you know, the exterior finish on this particular house? And certainly there should be some cross-referencing to other systems. So for example, I mentioned here, heating and ventilation details. Is it a wood stove? Is it a furnace? Is it electric baseboard heating? Is it sort of, we'll call it in-floor heating? And certainly another important thing when we think about fire is certainly where are the smoke alarms, and really there should be a carbon monoxide detector, especially if it's a fuel-fired appliance that were used for the heating system. So again, these are all showing things that are necessary on a floor plan. If it's not shown on the floor plan, as an example, we can see with a good set of structural drawings, we can link the two together, the structural drawings and the architectural drawings. And a lot of back and forth goes on between an architect and the engineer. Having been working in offices for a number of years in the architectural field, quite often, you know, like I mentioned, architects do specific things and engineers can help be part of that design team, and we coordinate and put things together to make sure that, you know, everything's aligned and everything's going to work. Well, let's take a look at a quick look at a floor plan. So A3.0 is one of the first, well, near the first, and this is the main floor plan of the house. And if we take a look at the upper portion, we see that the plan view, it has lots of dimensions and column references. And by the way, didn't we see those column and dimensional references also on the structural drawings? So again, you have to check to make sure that they are the same. Sometimes people can make mistakes and they might be different, but hopefully if they're coordinated well, like most architects and engineers will do, they should match up. Things should align. But if I kind of walk you through a little bit, if we take a look, I zoomed in a little bit here, we can see there's sort of the front porch, we'll call it. In fact, beyond the front porch, if we really take a close look, there's kind of a barrier-free ramp coming up also. Doesn't have to be there, but if this is kind of a good thing, if we're looking at providing something that is wheelchair accessible to get into this house and up to the level of this porch. We come through the front door and we end up in what's known as the gear room. And these sort of dashed circles represent a wheelchair turning radius. So for example, we can see there's free clearance that a wheelchair can be accommodated and basically almost turn around in this particular space. And that's good to see because when we jump over to, for example, let's walk through the hallway and down over to the kitchen, we see there's some barrier-free design in bathrooms, a bedroom, and a kitchen space. Again, as we go through, we can see there's a number of different symbols. So for example, WH, what's the WH? And if we go back to that, one of those first information sheets and think about abbreviations, that's a water heater. Or how about over here? We see there's some other things here. So we see there's some access panels. We can see there's a tub in a water closet, or some people like to call it a toilet here. Or we can see a vanity and a sink, and again, a turning radius and a linen closet. We see 3 bedrooms with closets. We see a nice open concept when we come in through this front area, and we take a look at the kitchen in this open concept area, which is part of that original sort of nice 3D view that we saw on one of the, actually the very first cover sheet. We took a look at the interior design of this space. It's a nice open concept, cathedral ceiling, you know. And if we take a look at it from a practical point of view, I like the fact that the way the architect has designed this, this is kind of the cold space. So when we think of cold weather and we see a door here, we see there's sort of, we'll call it sort of a block from the cold winter winds. We have a second door here. So once we're here, we're thinking about energy efficiency of trying to reduce the cold. Of course, down where I live, in some cases, some of the stores have a double door system with a vestibule here, basically creating the same type of thing. Kind of a tempering area to reduce all that cold air rushing in. So again, well thought out, well designed. Again, you'll see some things here. So for example, we see this is a wall, but if we come over here, we can see, actually, I'm sorry, this is the wall. And this opening here is actually the window in front of the kitchen sink. Looks like we have a wood burning stove over here, some kind of heating appliance here. So again, we can take a look at this and look at the information. And if we take a look at it from, I'm going to put on the estimator's point of view, there's a lot of good information here for me to do an estimate from. So again, these are all important details. And that's not to say that some other plans don't lack this level of detail, but certainly some do. And that's where, again, we get ourselves maybe into trouble. What we see here, when we take a look at the wall, we see actually 1, 2, sort of 3 divisions. So what really, when we take a look at this closer, there's W1, this is a wall system 1, okay? In this wall system 1, we can go back to the legend, again, going back to the one of those very first, I think second sheet rather, and we can take a look at what type of wall is this. What I can tell you right now, just looking at it, this is a wall, okay, a gap and a wall. So we have a double wall system here. So we got a little thicker than just a 2x4. We have a 2x4, another 4-inch space, and another 4-inch space. So we have roughly a 12-inch thick wall, which means this is going to be a nice, super insulated, very thermally efficient housing unit. So again, I don't want to get hung up on just the floor plan, but there's a lot of information depicted on this plan, and I could spend a lot more time just talking about the floor plan. Over here, we see one of these section cuts. So we see this bulb with kind of an arrow through it. And over here, we see kind of the tail to it. And what this really tells me or us is there's a section cut looking right through sort of from, we'll say, along this line, looking towards these bedrooms and along this gear room and bathroom. So there's some information. I take a look down here, and there's you know, more information and details. Okay, so this area here is enlarged. This area here is enlarged. We see some of these vertical cuts through here, indicating more section cuts. So there's a lot of good information shown because, as I mentioned, this is not 2 or 3 drawings. This is 20 plus drawings in this particular set of drawings. A lot of information, a lot of good information. So again, I tried to highlight in yellow here in this particular sheet. If we take a look at it, we take a look, this is a large view of the floor plan, just showing part of it. So I tried to highlight a little bit in yellow. Those are the major exterior walls. Again, not showing everything. And over here, we see some clear areas where I didn't highlight in yellow, where there's some window openings. So we have some window openings, door opening, another window opening. So again, openings, 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 and wall. So again, the closer we zoom in, and certainly when we have a full set of drawings, I'm basically working from a small scale set of drawings. So everything's not quite so clear here on this particular drawing. So again, things get a little bit blurred and we'll call it out of whack here. So again, just providing some more information. Again, if we take a look at this symbol, for example, it has 4 elevations of this particular room or space. There, 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 and there. So there's a lot of information the architect has provided, which is going to alleviate a lot of questionable questions in the field of, what am I supposed to do here? Like, this is shelving units. Over here we can see this is all, we'll call it the mechanical bathroom and so on. So again, a lot of good information is depicted here in this set of drawings. Okay, so let's go back to the structural, kind of jumping back and forth a little bit. We talked about the floor plan, and if we notice, the architect did not show up any floor system, the floor framing system. Some drawings will, but in this case, because they basically are working hand in hand, what we have here is this is the layout for all the framing system for the floor system of the house. So in this particular main floor framing, we see these dashed lines all indicating we'll call it the floor joists, or in some cases, it could be floor trusses. So it could be an engineered product. So again, we have to look at information. So for example, there's some shear wall here. So what's a shear wall? It's a structural wall system. Again, part of the support of the house, holding up the house and the floor. And again, we take a look at the framing members over here. We see, or even over on the porch, we see some framing and we see some decking, some deck boards, and so on. So again, there's a lot of good information shown here, but we have to take a look at the whole picture. Again, notes, the schedules. Thank you for the isometric. It kind of gives us a little bit of a three-dimensional. I know sometimes these floor plans are not the easiest to read in some cases, but this kind of gives us a little bit of a pictorial view of things. Again, engineered stamp structural drawings, which is also important. Just that alone, if we start thinking about it, when we talk about this, the structural framing requirements are certainly an important part of any construction build. So again, I'm not going to repeat myself, so let's move on to the next. So when we take a look at drawing A5, well, the architect also provided what is known as the roof plan. So in this particular cases, the architect has shown, again, with these solid lines here, representing each particular, we'll call it a part of the roof framing system. And if we take a look at it, each of these, if we go beyond column line 1, column line 11, indicates we have an overhang on the roof. Excuse me. And when we have an overhang on the roof means, well, yeah, well, those gable walls are protected. The exterior walls are protected to some degree because we have all that extra bit of material kind of protecting that outside wall. The problem with walls that tend to, or roof systems that tend to sort of be very, very close to the wall, it doesn't offer a lot of shelter, let's say from the rain or some of the building elements that can certainly always have a more direct impact on the exterior wall system. So again, that's a part of the roof framing system. Again, we see some section cut and details. Again, references to dimensions and column reference points. And again, roof plan legend and some notes about the roof plan. So again, like I say, there's a lot of information that we can take a look at even on a roof plan. Well, let's take a look at the engineer's roof framing plan, which pretty much mirrors what we've seen earlier from the architect. So S2.2 is the engineer's engineering of exactly what's required for the roof system. So for example, he talks about these are scissor trusses from here to here. And he talks about, well, how do we handle the endpoints, the overhangs beyond the wall? So he talks about these outlook framing system around especially these two gable ends. And so we see here, again, a nice 3D illustration of the roof framing system. Again, pay attention to the notes, the information on the drawings. And if we take a look at it, so for example, I can see here on this particular, over this window, it says it needs 2 2x8 lintels. Wow, I know what exactly I have to put over that opening to frame it. So if I'm the builder or the rough framing carpenter guy or person, we know exactly what has to go over that window. There's no second guessing of, oh, maybe a 2x4 slapped in there will work. So these are all designed out. And we can see this is a particular important piece of information. In fact, if we take a look at it, scissor roof trusses at 24 inches on center and 20-inch deep roof trusses at 24 inches on center. So again, the engineer has it all designed out. So again, we could spend a lot more time to get into everything that's shown on here, but again, with the short amount of time we have, I will move on. The next part I want to talk about after we're looking at the plans, we're going to talk about elevations because again, the elevations, what will an exterior view look like? What does the outside of the house really look like? Excuse me. So when we talk about elevation drawings provide the exterior views of the building structure. Most often they provide a specific level of information as indicated in this list. So when we think about that, we will look at what is included in the upcoming elevation slides when we take a look at it in the next few slides upcoming. So again, some critical things, dimensions of walls and windows and doors. Where's the grade level? Where's the floor level? In fact, exterior wall cladding. What is going on the outside? Is it wood siding? Is it vinyl siding? Is it some other material? Are there overhangs? Well, we saw the overhangs basically, that was picked up on the roof framing plan. What about the shape of the roof, the slope, or even the finish? And are there going to be rainwater leaders in eaves troughs? Again, I know the building code is not very good at saying you must have rainwater leaders in eaves troughs, but certainly it's part of, we'll call it the roof rainwater management type system. Again, actually the code doesn't really call for them. It may be something that is required in your particular area or not. So again, we'll move on and let's take a quick look at some of the elevations. This one is a look at, we'll call it the north elevation. Okay, so they use compass points. When we think about the compass, the north elevation, looking at it from the north point of view, and we can see this particular, well, I like to call this sort of the back or the rear part of the house because we don't see the porch here. So it must be the opposite wall, which is on the back side. Well, over here, we start taking a look and we see 1, 2, 3 bedroom windows. I see a bathroom window. This is the mechanical room window. This is where this gear room is over here. And if we take a look, we see there's a whole bunch of numbers here. So we see a little, we'll call it circle here with a number in it. So this is elevation materials legend. So rather than putting a whole bunch of notes here, what the architect sometimes will do is just designate what is number 1 or what is number 3. And it calls off down here in the schedule exactly what that is. We can see these are windows. When I take a look at these are opening casement windows. This is a hopper, okay, a ventilator that's hinged at the top type window. So again, we can see some variations using the architectural symbols that I'm very familiar with as what this means. And again, it looks like all these horizontal lines, we have some type of horizontal siding going on. And below grade here, we see some type of finish between the bottom of the floor and going down to the grade. So we see the grade. And they don't give us dimensions, but they do give us some designation as far as levels are concerned. So for example, we see a dimension here, GFP. So the ground floor plan's at 0. This is lower, so it shows negative. And if we take a look, this says 8 foot and something. So again, we can see there's information shown here. What are these things? These look like these, oh, that might be a stack for that let's say, let's call it a wood burning a stove. Or is this part of a vent pipe over here? So again, we can go to the legend and take a look and see what exactly are these things. Now, although these dimensions are shown here, these are often not always required, but certainly there's nothing wrong with putting them here, of repeating what's by dimension from the floor plan. So drawing A6 really provides a good amount of information and representation of this north elevation of the house. If we review the information provided, as I mentioned, it's going to provide us with all the keys to what do all these numbers mean here. So these are sort of labeled materials in identification of what's going on in this particular elevation. We can kind of see off sort of in the background, this is the stairs leading up to that front porch. So we kind of see that in this particular point of view. Here's kind of an enlarged view of it. And again, just we can enlarge things and take a look at a little closer detail. And here's sort of we'll call it towards that front porch. This is we'll call it a front facing towards the porch east elevation. So again, we see the porch here. This would be the window going into the garment room. And we can see our gable type of roof here, okay? And then if we take a look at it, we see our stack here, okay, and vent over here. And this shows, it shows an eaves trough and some downspout. And it looks like it's kicking off the water off over to this box here. And this box is identified exactly what that is. And we can kind of see where the grade level is here. Now, sometimes in some architectural drawings, you may see, for example, are there footings or foundations below grade? And sometimes those would be shown as hidden or what we call dashed lines. So that's the only difference that you might see on some particular elevations. Again, looking at the front porch, the kitchen window, going over to sort of the dining and living space. So again, I won't go through all the information there. But again, to kind of give you a quick general overview, once you've seen one elevation, the other should be similar, just looking different because it's from a different point of view, looking at the outside of the house. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about sections and details. Another critical part of any set of architectural or construction drawings for any house is, or in fact, any building really, is sections and details. So a section represents a view of the house along an imaginary line. In fact, you can take the word house and say any building along an imaginary line at a particular location and illustrates the construction details. The extent of this section should correspond with the sectional arrow shown on the plan. So for example, is it full length right across, we'll say from the outside to the outside, or is it only partial, showing only a part of the house? So again, it's important to notice, to be aware of what's the difference between sections and details. Well, sections for the most part are usually, when we take a look at it, a slice going through a larger portion, and a detail shows in more detail, as the word implies, more information at a larger scale. Thus, we can get into all the building components and get more clarification. So again, what should we see when we talk about sections and details? We need to get more detailed information, understand, for example, how are we going to build the floor, the wall, the roof, foundation? And what about the various building systems within this construction? And how about the different building components? This is where the builder can graphically visualize exactly what materials and the various building components are to be built and put together as part of that particular system. So we can see, for example, attic or crawl space. Hopefully we would see, for example, in an attic, we should see insulation. Hopefully in an attic, we might see, depending on where the section's cut, we should see some ventilation too. So some aspects of the project may require some specific details, such as engineered roof truss drawings. In our particular project, these set of drawings, they're engineered, so we don't need truss drawings. We can, once a builder is selected, they may be required to submit shop drawings indicating that they meet the engineering drawings. But in many cases where there's no architect or engineer involved, quite often it'll just say, you know, let's put the responsibility on the, we'll call it the truss supplier. And those drawings need to be stamped in order to be technically really recognized as the official, we'll call it less risky way of making sure we get a good roof on a particular building or house. So let's take a look at a cross section. So going back to one of those very first ones I said, we're going to slice through from end to end of this house, looking towards the bedroom, in this case, the bedroom doors. We see all the bedroom doors and bathroom and the gear room here. We see the living, dining, kitchen space, gear room, and this would be the utility room, okay, mechanical room. If we take a look at it, we should be able to see some foundation and some structural support. We see the framing system for the floor. We see the roof trusses up here in sort of this, we'll call it attic space, okay? We see part of this overhang, which is the finish in elevation, technically indicating that there's an overhang that goes beyond the outside walls. Again, we have reference guides. So for example, how far above grade is the floor? And to this point, and this point, and so we have reference points for the builder to basically meet as far as the construction is concerned. So again, a lot of good information, but we can also see here, if we take a look at it, so here's a section cut, but here's the detail. The detail is going to take us over here in this detail and show us at a larger scale exactly what is going on here. When we take a look at it, it's not very, very clear. I mean, I can pretty much determine what it is, but for most people, you might not be able to try and figure out what the heck is going on in this particular detail or this detail. So again, we can move on, but that's one slicer cut vertically through the length of the house. We can see the interior doors, as I mentioned. Note the other related section details, which is important. So again, we've already jumped down to drawing A12. Well, here's A13, looking at it from a different point of view, from front to back, we'll call it. So if we take a look, remember we were showing the eave trough and downspout over here? Well, here's taking a look through the living room and through a bedroom. So we can see we have kind of a cathedral ceiling going on. And we have, this is a bedroom, and this is the bedroom closet door. This is the partition dividing, we'll call it the living space from the bedroom and bathroom and mechanical room space, kind of the common wall. And again, we can see another enlarged detail. This is section cut, that's illustrated. These are details. So when we take a look at the detail, we can find out exactly what's going on here in a larger scale. Again, if I take a look at it, again, it shows our trusses. So we have our scissor truss here and our floor truss system here. And again, we can see our screw piles, and we can see our built up structural member here, tying this beam from basically screw pile to screw pile, all engineered out together. So A13, note the construction details identified on this particular section. Over here, we can see these little triangular things, which gives us sort of what's the roof pitch. And again, not a lot of information. There could be more information on some of these drawings, but actually there's a lot of information already provided. Another view, looking at it, front porch to, we'll call it the kitchen, going into the kitchen door and into the water closet area. So again, a lot of nice section cuts. It does not lack in detail. And certainly any builder would be able to amply build when they take a look at these set of drawings. So a lot of the questions are answered because the architect has done a fantastic job of giving us lots of detail to be able to follow how to build. Again, another detailed blow up here. And again, we'll take a look at a few of those later. Another section cut. Again, in this particular section cut, just for those that were wondering, well, are we just looking at screw pile system? Well, if we take a look at this one, this is really a footing with a pressure treated a wood frame, AKA kind of a crawl space area. So again, we have information for various types of applications. So again, certainly this is, I guess, the crawl space area, and we can take a look at it from a different point of view. So if we take a look at it, section DD PWF, that's P pressure treated wood foundation, abbreviated. So again, just to kind of give you more information. Again, another section cut, again with PWF system. So again, similar to what we saw before, but this time with a pressure treated wood foundation. There's utility service boxes here, and we'll talk a little bit about those later. But anyways, you get a lot of good information from these particular sets of drawings. Now, what we saw earlier were all section cuts. Well, let's talk about some section details. So we can see here rather on sheet A17 called section details, the architect has provided us with, so for example, wall window detail. So we see again our structural support here, our truss system, our wall system here, and this is cut at a window. So again, there's even more detail blow-ups, okay? And more against at the head or the top of the window here, coming up into the roof framing, so up into the roof framing. But if we jump over here, what we see here is actually portrayed right here. So again, we see a little larger scale. So again, section, not a lot of clarity to the action section cut detail. It gives us kind of a general quick overview. Wall sections provide us with greater detail, and certainly detail of wall section details, or not just wall section details, but these enlarged details provide more detail if we want to enlarge it and look at it. So for example, we see here, there's very few notes here. But if we come over here, we see all the information about every component that's going into that head of the window. So what's this lintel like? We can see here, it's all detailed out. Well, what about the sill here for the window? And what about the ceiling of the window and the flashing and making sure that it's properly installed? Over here, these are what they call frost box details. So for example, the frost box allows, let's say, for example, some services to come in. So for example, this could be water, this could be electrical power underground, and so on. So even detailed out some of these frost box details for us. So again, jumping to sheet A17. Again, similar to what we saw earlier, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but let's jump over to some of the other, for example, the roof section details. So again, enlarged section detail, explaining at the ridge of the roof, okay, the flashing, the membranes. Look at the insulation. We got lots of insulation up into this attic space. And if we take a look at an overhang, so for a gable end overhang, a section detail. So everything's nicely detailed out here, so it doesn't lack really for any other information. So it should be pretty clear, not just to the estimator, but also to the builder, exactly what needs to be done on this particular build. The front porch, exterior stair section. So again, sheet 19. I've got blank space here, but hey, sheet 19. How about some plan details? So again, plan details we could go through. Again, we can take the floor plan, and really these plan details are just enlarged views of critical details of the floor plan itself. So for example, how does a partition in general basically tie to the outside wall? Or what about where there's a corner condition such as this? So for example, porches here, we have kind of this wall coming here, and we have a wall coming here. So again, taking a look at the exterior corner interior wall detail conditions. One of the, getting towards the end of this, the NBC fireplace requirements. So we take a look at this. Again, we have a plan view over to the left, and we have some information about this wood stove is not a primary heating source. So this might be just supplemental heating. Perhaps there's a furnace. Perhaps there's baseboard heating. Again, it could vary, obviously, depending on the community, what is available. But everything here has to be what's called wet inspected and certified, wood energy transfer technology. So again, it's got to be on something that is fireproof, and there needs to be certain clearances, as we can see here, clearance dimensions. So again, it's on a non-combustible pad, so to speak. It has non-combustible material against the wall, again, providing, we'll call it limiting distance for fire protection, and so on. How does it go up through the roof system? How is it flashed, and so on? So this all shows up here when we take a look at the fireplace. In this case, not necessarily fireplace, but I like to call it kind of the stove or wood burning appliance detail. Another thing that's not always found on many drawings is what are some of the finishes? often this is where a lot of money can be spent because, again, from an estimator's point of view, if I'm looking at it from an estimate, is what's on the floor? Is it painted walls or is it wood paneling or what is going on? So we can see here, this is a room finish schedule. It talks about the room name, the floor, the base, and all the various levels here. So for example, the ceiling material, okay, WD, wood, GB, gypsum board. So again, abbreviations used, but we can see a lot of this is vinyl plank, luxury vinyl plank flooring, or linoleum sheet goods. And likewise, what about windows and doors? So again, the architect has put a lot of work and effort and thought into what is required for the finishing, whether it's a room, the windows, or the doors, because these are all important, bits of information when we talk about finishing. Again, he goes into window elevation. So what do they look like? What size are they? How high are they above the floor? So a TO is top of finished floor, ground floor rather. So the height of the windows, what size are they? Width and height, and so on. Again, if we take a look at, there are some energy performance specifications. So when we take a look at, we could take a look at the specifications for this project. That's a whole other discussion in itself. But these energy performance specifications are going to vary, again, depending on which climate zone this build is going to take place. But nowadays, if I start taking a look at things, the energy performance level of windows, again, in my area, the south, I don't need triple pane windows, and I don't need high thermal insulation values or high energy performance windows. Yeah, I can put them in, but if this is going to be a build in further north, certainly we need to be aware of what are the minimum performance when we take a look at building code when it comes to thermal efficiency and energy savings. Sometimes what we do forget is that when a build takes place is that house from the south is not going to be good for a house in the north. So we need to recognize those differences. Again, window frames, or excuse me, in this case, sorry, door elevations. What do the doors look like? So I can see some doors here with some, it looks like it has some nice panels to it. Panel, or in some cases it may be glass. I can't specifically tell at this level of detail, reading those notes. Reflected ceiling plans. Wow, we got a lot of information here. So for example, all these little dotted area rooms are gypsum board. So basically drywall finish on the ceilings. And all these ones with the lines through it represent wood paneling. So we have a wood finish in our particular, we'll call it more living open spaces, and more of a, again, drywall or gypsum board finish in this particular, we call it bedroom and bathroom space. Again, more notes and information are offered. So again, we have to look at the amount of information that we have on any plan, into the level of detail that's provided to us to make sure that we're going to actually get what was basically required when we take a look at a set of drawings. Interior elevations, the kitchen. Okay, so for example, we see the range hood. Okay, we see the oven or range here. Kitchen cabinets. So again, the architect's pretty much detailed out what's the millwork or the cabinetry for the kitchen area. When we take a look at some of the other finish areas, so for example, we see some of the elevations of a particular room, for example, bedrooms or bathrooms and so on. So for example, the bathroom grouping over here, these are some of the bedrooms and so on. So again, a continuation of interior elevations. Last but not least, we come down to the L1.0, and it's a site plan. Now this is just a representational because we know this house is just simply going to be placed on some land somewhere. And this is just representational, so it's not meant to be, this is the way it is. This is just representational, showing some orientation where, for example, he calls this a sample road, a shared driveway, kind of with a cul-de-sac drive parking area. House here, house there. So again, just representational as a site plan, not intended to be the finished product. So at that point, whoops, what happened? Did I jump over one here? Yes, I did. I jumped over a couple. Going back here, again, taking a look at the general notes. General notes are important because often what is lacking is if there's no specifications, okay, general notes will help in clarifying what's required for a project. So for example, all relevant CSA codes, building codes will be followed. It talks about wood, it talks about lintels, the materials, nailing, allowing space between sheets, 1/16 inch space between sheets of plywood for expansion. Again, shop drawings, false work. So again, often the architect may, if there's limited specifications, offer specifications on a set of construction drawings. Some architects do a little bit of both, some on the drawings, and maybe a lot more in kind of the specification book itself. Again, just electrical schematic. Not all drawings or house plans will give you electrical drawings, but I find it's very handy to have electrical drawings because where will the receptacles, all those outlets and switches go? When we have something like this, it's pretty clear what the intent is. So for example, we can see 6 lights over here, another 2 lights, these lines showing this as a connection, coming back over to a switch. When we come in this door, there's a switch on the wall just as we come inside the door. And that, by the way, meets code. It shouldn't be behind the door. It should be readily accessible, you know, within, we'll call it arm's length grab, and so on. But what about, for example, we see a ceiling fan over here? Or what about the requirements for exhaust hood or things like that? Bathrooms, we need ground fault protection. So in bathrooms, wet areas, ground fault protection. So again, the electrical plans can be very handy. It eliminates questions. Where is the electrical service panel? Well, I would imagine it's somewhere in the mechanical room here, okay, this equipment room, and so on. Or it might be perhaps in some cases, perhaps in the gear room, depending where the local electrical service comes in. So again, I'll leave that with you. And John, any questions, or the floor is open if anybody wants to chat or.
We have a couple questions for a chat. So Doug mentioned, would the change in code by region not be covered by provincial amendments? So I believe so. We built this to National Building Code in Saskatchewan requirements, correct?
Yeah, these drawings meet the National Building Code, and basically Saskatchewan does use the National Building Code, but does it meet provincial? Depends on which province. So for example, if this was going to be built in Ontario, and it needs to get an Ontario approval, then certainly there could be some other things that need to be addressed. I would say for the most part, when we take a look at National Building Code, my comments are this. National Building Code is the baseline. You might say it's the model code. Anything that is derived on top of that, or any variation that might reduce it to some degree, is basically what I would call the provincial flavor to a building code. BC has some high standards. Certainly Ontario has high standards. So again, I can't guarantee these drawings would meet 100%, but I would say they're certainly probably very close to the high 90% plus factor of meeting their particular codes.
Yeah. So Clayton mentioned about we do have other plans besides pylons, which we do. We have foundation for crawl spaces, which you discussed.
Yes. Yeah, I think again, we didn't, when we take a look at it, I mean, certainly this house could go on an ICF system. We see pressure treated wood foundations seem to be fairly popular because of the, we'll call it, I guess, the cost savings. ICFs are nice, but ICFs themselves can be an expensive system. But certainly ICF has the extra advantage of being we'll call it a super insulated system. So again, yeah, we don't have plans specifically, but I'm sure there could be reasonable adoptions made to accommodate, let's say, a different type of foundation system.
Okay.
Concrete blocks, who knows?
Okay, any questions, comments? Raise your hand or show your picture. Go ahead, Tava. Oh, I gotta
Yeah.
unmute you. Go ahead.
Yeah, when can we actually look at the drawings? You know, we're hoping to build as soon as possible. Like a month ago, and we kind of been waiting for the drawings. When can we actually get the drawings? Or do we have to finish
yeah.
both of these webinars first, or how's that gonna
Yeah,
work?
so there's the second webinar tomorrow, and then I'll need the waiver signed, and we can send them out. But, you know, we want a little bit more. What we're trying to avoid is sole sourcing on the architectural plans, right? So we want to see how you're going to tender. Are you having a couple people tendering on these agreements? What we're trying to avoid is you take the plans and you hire one contract to do the sole source. As you know, these plans are extremely expensive, and we're very hesitant to feed into a sole source. So that's sort of why we're doing a step by step and release. So so we need to get a feel on how they're being used, and then we just release them all to you. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and the designer. So you're getting $220,000 in architectural drawings for your use within the community.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
And then I think it's important, like you say, John, there is a second part to this tomorrow, which we can talk about, I guess, what the contracting and procurement portion of it.
Yes.
Which is equally as important.
Yeah. Go ahead, Karen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering about that procurement. So what if we have our own carpenters and we choose to do it under the housing department, like to do our stick bills under the housing department? Like, does that mean like, well, we're not saying that it's never going to happen in the future, because these are like, once we get these, aren't they free for us to use like in 10 years if we choose to keep building the same units, or are we limited to a certain amount of use for them?
No, so we own the plans, so we're loaning them to you to use as you see fit. What we're trying to encourage is communities, and I understand, you know, because we work with some communities that they have their own crews that are building, correct? So there's a number of crews within the communities. What we're trying to avoid is, you know, a council hiring one of their relatives to build based on these, and there's not a sole source. So if you have a number of people in the community that are trained as carpenters, we'll be okay with that. But the question is that giving you value for money? So that's the concern that we sort of have, but we don't have control on that, right? So
Okay.
yeah, what we're trying to avoid is what we've witnessed is, you know, communities are receiving substantial amount of money as part of the Canadian housing strategy on forgivable loans, millions of dollars, and there's one on a sole source for $2.6 million on a sole source. So the question is, how do you get a $2.6 million sole source contract without a tender? So we're trying to avoid those situations because they raise a lot of red flags, and we just don't want to be involved in that red flag raising.
So when you say we own this, is this FNNBOA?
Yes. Yeah.
So
So we
that-
own, So we own the plans, we purchased them, and we will, and through the waiver, we're lending them to you to use, but we will always own the plans. But the waiver is saying you can use the plans, but you're using them at your discretion and at your due diligence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, but you're right, you can hold them for a couple of years, which we hope so, because you know, we want the communities to use them, because we know very few communities use architectural design plans.
John, I think the other thing too that we didn't spend a lot of time on is the work that was done on the energy modeling of the house. And that's an important part, because as we see building codes are becoming more, I guess, progressive when it comes to thermal energy efficiency and energy efficiency in general. You know, getting towards net zero, we hope that the uptake will be that, hey, this is the house that we talked about, like the old R2000 house that used to be in prior to the year R2000 as being the cutting edge of, let's say, a house building or home building. So when we take a look at this, there's also the energy efficiency component. Although we haven't talked a lot about cost of units, certainly there is more cost involved in this type of a build. But at the same time, the net result is the savings over, we'll say, what, the life cycle of the house.
Yes, yeah, and that's correct. So when we designed this, we know that when we did a cost estimate for one of the communities, it ranged to 20 to 30% more. But in terms of energy saving and long term, there's a substantial savings in the long term. So, and that's where we designed this. And by the way, these plans also meet all the CMHC housing strategy requirements. So they're meeting net zero, they're meeting codes, they go beyond codes. So, and then further north, I know that Linda has joined us from Nunavut. So these can also definitely be for a northern Arctic build as well. Okay, so if that's it, then tomorrow we do the procurement, and I've already received a number of the waivers, so we're hoping to push these out by the next few days. And then we'll be sending them out, I believe, Chloe, we're gonna be sending them out by because they're large files, we're gonna put them up on a link, and then they can download them, correct?
Yeah, they could go onto a link download, or we could probably put them on we'll say a download type server.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you can access them. And then there are a lot of pages, and then you would have to print them, and what's also good about these is you can use these for tendering, right? And that's what we're talking about tomorrow, how to use these for part of for your estimating. So, all right, thank you, everyone. Oh, one more, Pam. Go ahead, Pam.
Thanks. Yeah, I just had a quick question about, you were mentioning the energy modeling, and that you were able to actually project it in terms of like the costs of building at this standard, but also seeing the savings that you could see with energy, like with lowered energy use. And I'm wondering if like that information, that modeling could also be shared, or at least the results of it.
I believe we should be able to do that. We can get that, we received those reports, did we, Chloe?
Yeah, we do have the various modeling reports depending on the energy source. But yeah, I don't see a problem sharing those, because it really is we'll say it's more specific to this particular, we'll say, design of the house. And certainly they looked at it from not just a 1, 2, or 3 or 4 bedroom, but also sort of right across the board of really that any differences in the efficiencies.
That's awesome. That'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. And tomorrow, 3 o'clock, procurement, we don't think it's gonna be, probably about 45 minutes at best, pretty short, but we assume to be many questions. So, all right, thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.